If I could go back to my first year triathlon, the one thing that I would do differently is the Ironman brand going to suffer because of the extreme heat across Europe and the UK? With multiple races cancelled, some even cut short, how will Ironman adjust to accommodate to these extreme temperatures? Essentially, you can't outbuy your gut, and the brand you're using usually isn't the problem, it's the fact that you haven't trained your gut enough. You can go up 5 grams of carbs per week until you hit your limit, but most people just jump about 30 grams, and this is the mistake. But race day is the worst time to be a scientist. Don't try anything new on race day, your gut isn't used to it. Welcome to the 168 Hour Podcast. Episode 1 was about the metabolic ceiling and how many calories you can actually absorb over a long period of time. And episode 2 follows on quite nicely because this is all about the gut, and we will be going over how you can fuel to maximize your potential on race day. Now, every athlete, at least once in their racing career, will go through a time where they're halfway through the bike or maybe step off the bike and you can tell that something's just not right. Your stomach is hurting, you can't perform to your full potential, and you simply don't know why. Well, that's likely because your nutrition is not correct. You fueled for 5 hours on the bike, but you haven't had enough, or you've had too much. You've trained for a year, all the leg muscles, the swimming muscles, but you haven't trained the gut. And funnily enough, it works in the same way. The gut is highly adaptable, and the more you train it, the more you can absorb. So, without further ado, this is the 168 Hour Podcast, Episode 2, How to Train Your Gut and Perform to Your Maximum Potential. Every episode will follow a structure. The structure is science. I will give you something that you hopefully learn. This week is the gut and the science behind it. We will then move on to new bits of kit within triathlon and current news. There's a lot of current news due to the extreme heat that we are currently facing across the UK and some parts of Europe. We will then move on to the amateur impact and how this all affects us moving forward. Quick context, I am also a triathlete. I'm currently out injured, although it's now progressing very nicely after 12 weeks. So I also race full distance Ironmans, 70.3s, and hopefully get back before the season ends with an Olympic distance triathlon. So this is what this show is all about. So let's start with the science section. So 10 years ago, the research around nutrition was that you could consume 60 grams of carbs per hour, and that would get you to your potential. Now, the science is very much different, and you can consume between 90 and 120 grams of carbs safely. Elite athletes are pushing 140 plus, with the extreme going much higher. And I'm talking about the pros that are at kind of the top level that have been doing this for years and years and years. They are pushing some crazy numbers of carbs per hour. But this is a thing that most people don't understand, and is you can't turn up on race day and just start smashing 100, 110, 120 grams of carbs per hour after training a lot lower. Maybe it's 60 or 70 grams. You could maybe do it for an hour, 2 hours, but if you're racing a full distance Ironman, you're not going to get very far. But the most recent or the most used paper in this, the academic article, is by a guy called Asker, and I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce the surname, but I'll put the link in the description. And the paper was published in 2017 in the Sports Medicine Journal, and it was called Training the Gut for Athletes. So quite simple. And what that paper found out is the gut is highly adaptable, and is essentially like a muscle. And if you train it with almost progressive overload, like we all talk about, not doing too much too soon on a run or on a bike or on a swim, the same principle applies to the gut. So there is two different transporters within the gut, and I'm not going to go into them as that's a bit out of my knowledge, but all you guys need to know is there's one transporter that transports glucose and one that transports fructose, and both can be adapted. They can move more sugar if you train them, essentially giving you more energy on the bike. But this is a thing that most people don't realize, and I mentioned this earlier, is it's like staying at an hour on the bike. If you never apply that progressive overload, you'll never progress. And it's the same for the gut. The gut adapts, but only if you train it. But how is this? So there's multiple transporters that can transport the carbs that you put in, glucose and fructose, and that's used in a 2-to-1 ratio. So if you look on most gel packets, it'll usually be maltodextrin plus fructose. That is a mouthful. And all this means is you can put more carbs in your body, just in different forms. And this essentially means that there is different traffic lanes. Think about it as two different roads. So one is transporting one type and one is transporting the other, and there's no build-up of traffic because you're just trying to put as many carbs down as possible down one road. And the gut adapts just like a muscle. So if you put in these in and you go at 5 grams every single week, then you will likely, eventually you will hit a wall, but you just need to find out that wall. And what some people don't realize about this is some people go from 60 to 100 and think that's too much for me, I'll go back to 60, where it just doesn't work like that. And I feel like this is the one piece of knowledge that is currently missing from the nutrition circle on social media, if you want to call it that. You see these people and what they are consuming, and that might not always be right for you. So you can essentially move up to about 120 grams. This is what the research is suggesting, as long as that comes with progressive overload. However, you can get some gels that don't come in that 2-to-1 ratio. This is for people with stomach issues and potentially don't get along with something in the gel. Again, there's a lot more science behind this, and this is a whistle-stop overview to hopefully give you some more knowledge about how you can fuel your bike or run or triathlon. So when do you take these? Well, just break it down. If you're taking 90 grams of carbs, then take one 30-gram gel every 20 minutes. I usually start about 45 minutes into my race. I know a lot of athletes that also do the same, but you don't want to leave it any more than an hour, because that's when your carb storage starts to deplete. So when do you know when you've kind of hit your limit? Well, if you've built up gradually, again, using that progressive overload, and you essentially start feeling stomach problems, then you've probably gone too far. There's no real big science behind it. It's just how you feel. You might be able to get to that 120 grams that the research is saying, or you might only be able to get to about 90 to 100. I personally take about 90 to 100 grams of carbs, but that's just solely because I haven't tried to train my gut past that. I have had gut issues in the past, but I didn't know about this science behind it at the time. This was a good couple of years ago, and when I was reading through the science, it kind of all made sense. So a bit of insight into this. Some people think that the product's the problem, and in some cases it can be. The brand of gel you're using can be the problem, although a lot of gels are the same and have very similar, if not the same, ingredients in them. So the product most likely isn't the problem. It's your ability to process those carbs and move those carbs through your system effectively without getting those horrendous stomach issues. Essentially, it's a training problem. We train hours on the swim, hours on the bike, and hours on the run. Very few of us spend hours training the gut. And this might be the key to get your next best within a triathlon, whether that be long distance or short distance. So, if you haven't trained the gut, it's not going to work. And that's one thing I want you to take away from this podcast. Is go out over the next 12 to 16 weeks and try and slowly up that carb intake. We are mid-season now. At the time of filming this, it is the 14th of July. So we are pretty much mid-season, and I wouldn't recommend trying to go mad on your carbs if you've got a race in the coming weeks. Maybe leave it for next season, as you don't want anything going wrong with your stomach. So there is 4 rules essentially to training your gut. Start 8 to 14 weeks out from your next race. Use long sessions, the same brands, the same amounts, and the same timings. And as the weeks go on, slowly up the amount. Build progressively, like I said before. I'd start on 60 grams if you're fairly new to triathlon, and then up that 5 grams every week. If the stomach starts to play up, drop it back. Use the 2-to-1 ratio if you can, if you haven't got any stomach problems, or if you can use that 2-to-1 ratio, then use it. Most gels will have that in. Check the label to make sure they have got them in, and then nothing new at least 4 weeks out from your race, because your stomach will start to play up and your gut needs to know what you're going to take, when you're going to take it, and how much you're going to take. It is very easy to aid your gut in playing up, and don't let your next race go to waste because you haven't got your nutrition right, because it is so simple when you know how. It's just with all this stuff on social media, people overcomplicate it, and it doesn't need to be overcomplicated. So, 5 fueling mistakes that I see. That was the science. And now kind of training athletes. Here are 5 mistakes that some of them I've made myself, some of them I've seen other athletes make. So mistake 1, underfueling on the bike because you haven't got an effective nutrition strategy. Now we can't fuel in the swim. Your breakfast should essentially fill that. If you're going over an hour, have a gel ready for when you come out of the swim, ready to take, and then start in 20-minute intervals. That's what I usually do. If you miss that gel when you come out of the swim, especially if you've been going between an hour 20 and an hour and a half, or an hour and 40 and so on, that's when you can start to fall behind on nutrition, and that's when the bike starts to go bad. And I made this mistake last year in Ironman Wales. I forgot to take a gel coming onto the bike and never caught up until about 10k into the run. And I can tell you, it is horrific. You have no energy to go, you've done all this training, and you're looking down at your bike computer and you can't hit the powers you've been hitting for the last 5 months. So make sure you have those early gels, early carbs, and get ahead of get ahead on your energy so you're not bonking later on. And then mistake 2, this was actually in the same race, is no new products on race day. Now I've also made this mistake. I was going down a hill and my bike hit a pole and my bottles come out of my bike. Now in this situation I had no choice but to pick up the Morton gels that were on the Ironman station, and my gut did not get along. Slightly different ingredients, gut wasn't used to it, but again I had no choice. It was either go these next 6 or 7 hours without carbs, or just suck it up and try and take it. Luckily it wasn't too bad, but it did upset my stomach, and yeah, I definitely didn't perform at my full potential. Another error that I see is when you're on quite a technical course, people forgetting to fuel altogether. You're either going uphill or you're going on a technical downhill when you need to be quite concentrated, or you're focused on climbing the hill or concentrated going down, is people forget to fuel because they're so concentrated. And I can get why, I do get why, but there should be measures in place if you know that you are going to forget to take on fuel. Personally, I set my watch to go off on a timer every 15 minutes. When it goes off, I then know I need to take some water and some gel. And that works for me. Going on to kind of the water, mistake 3 is people only take electrolytes and gels. Now, I don't know if some people get along with this, but I certainly don't. I need water as well, and I'm pretty sure most other people do. You can't just take gels, you can't just take electrolytes. Sometimes you just need water. So make sure you get into a habit, whatever works for you in your training. Again, I can't give you one solution for this. You just need to experiment within your training and see what works best for you. I personally take 1 gel followed by about 100 mils of water, and then sip on electrolytes until my next gel. And then mistake 4 with nutrition is the little breakfast trap or the big breakfast trap. There is no excuse for not eating before a full Ironman race and the 70.3. People say, I don't like breakfast. Well, you don't like racing in that case, because you're never going to race your full potential if you're not eating before. Whether that's liquid calories, Huel, do excellent stuff, having a carb drink before, but ideally you want between 600 and 1,000 calories before you race. And when I say that to some athletes, they kind of take a breath and think, whoa, I've never ate 1,000 calories for breakfast before. Again, practice this before your long rides. I know a lot of us like to go out early in the morning, but you need to get up that little bit earlier so you can have that big breakfast and practice exactly what you're going to do come race day. That leaves us to the big breakfast trap. Don't go thinking I'm going to do an Ironman. I can eat anything I want. Get the hash browns down here, the bacon, the sausage, the beans, the bread. No, don't do it. It'll bloat you up. It'll still be sat there in the swim and you'll feel absolutely horrendous. I personally go for a load of porridge with some peanut butter and some honey. Before other training, I'll usually have some fruit with that, but on race day, I want to limit my fibre, so I remove the fruit a couple of days before. But that bowl of porridge will be like this big. It will be absolutely crazy. I think there's about 150 grams of oats in there with a whole lot of honey on there, and that's what works for me. And then mistake 5, coming away from racing a little bit and back into training, is ignoring the gut on easy sessions. Even if you're going out for a 2-hour easy ride, you still need to fuel. Anything after an hour, you don't need to fuel as much, but listen to your body, because I'm almost positive you'll need to fuel after about 1 hour and 20 minutes. And it's better to build those habits in the easy sessions, so when the hard sessions do come and you've got those race pace intervals, then it's second nature to take on some nutrition. In kind of conclusion of this bit, don't let any race day disasters appear because you haven't practiced your nutrition and you don't know what you're doing with nutrition. If you don't take something away from this podcast, then go and look at something else just before you go out on a ride or the day before, and get that nutrition right. And that's kind of the science plus mistakes that you shouldn't make. And I hope you've taken something away from that, because I certainly did when reading about it. Now on to the Ironman news. Wow, it's been an insane couple of weeks. Ironman races have suffered, and all triathlon races have suffered because of the heat. Extreme heat has cancelled races, made them cut short. For example, Ironman Frankfurt, where the Norwegians dominated once again, was cut from a 180 kilometre bike to a 125 kilometre bike, and the marathon was cut to a half marathon. Now I understand why they did this. The heat was insane, but I do also feel for the athletes to go out there, all those long sessions that get you to 180k and that marathon alone, and then having it cut short. Quite disappointing. However, it's still an official Ironman result, and it's the second year in a row that this race has been affected by the heat. Moving on, Ironman Nice a couple of weeks ago was cancelled altogether. Regardless of this, some athletes still went out on the day and completed the course in an unofficial attempt of an Ironman, and yeah, it's just gutting for athletes. I'm pretty sure they cancelled this either the day or 2 days prior to the race, so all athletes had already flown out, accommodation was booked, bikes were out there, and I'm quite curious to see what everyone else will kind of do in this situation, so please let me know in the comments. In more recent news, this last weekend, Harry Palmer won Swansea. I think it was for the second year in a row, but 3 times overall, and he come across the line in 3 hours and 50 minutes, which is absolutely insane. 3 hours and 50 minutes for a 70.3 in the heat. The Swansea swim was a non-wetsuit legal race, if that makes sense. And I'm also Welsh, and I'm pretty sure that is the first time that has ever happened in any race in Wales ever. So it's crazy. But where this kind of lines up with us amateurs is, right now you pay around £500, £550 for an Ironman 70.3 entry, the coaching, family and the travel, and you do now run the risk of that race being cancelled in the summer because of extreme heat, especially if you're going in kind of Europe. The UK is still relatively safe from this at the minute, but in a couple of years is anyway going to be safe. Moving to the Pro Series, the Norwegians are dominating. Top 3 in the men's Pro Series, and first position 1 in the women's. And this is all, we've all heard of the Norwegian method of training, but it is so hard for amateur athletes to replicate because of the technology that goes behind it. But what they are doing very well is they are doing their easy sessions extremely easy, and the hard sessions hard. and there is no middle ground. They've taken out the middle ground altogether. They're also putting in 2 threshold sessions per day, and this is being lactate controlled. Again, comes down to technology, and as an amateur athlete, we can't do it. And they are very specific in where their lactate goes. Around 75 to 80% of their training is also easy. So that's the same as what kind of all of us should be doing. It's just they're doing it a lot better with a lot more technology, and this method, the Norwegian method, is officially taking over. But that brings us, and I'm quite excited, to Sam Laidlow's recent Ironman performance, which I'm pretty sure was a world record. Now I haven't got the exact times up, but to have someone smash that world record in Challenge Roth, not being Norwegian at this point, I think it's a pretty big step in the world of triathlon, because although they are dominating overall, it still shows that if you are not doing that type of training, that you can still get there. And essentially other pros shouldn't be disheartened because they can't have the technology and the way of training that some of the Norwegians are doing. However, why are they so good? Why are the Norwegians so good? Well, Norway has invested nationally in the sports science sector. And they essentially trained up a whole generation of coaches in this one way of training, and now all the country is training like it, where I feel like other countries around Europe and the UK are kind of separated in the way they train, and you have lots of different coaches doing lots of different things, even at the professional level. But this way that they're training in Norway keeps things the same across the board, and that is reflective in the current professional standings. Now for amateurs, how this kind of links to us is we all know most of us train too hard on easy days. We can't let our ego go, or we just want to go. But the question you should be asking yourself is, am I training hard enough on my hard days? And this is what separates you from everyone else, or the Norwegians from everyone else, is how hard and consistent they are actually training. So that was the news in current triathlon. Now if you have any more, then please let me know in the comments below, and I will discuss it in next week's episode. In terms of current technology, so what is new? Continuous glucose monitors are being used, which are sensors on your upper arm, and it effectively allows you to have a 24-hour, be able to monitor your blood glucose for 24 hours. It was originally for diabetics and originally developed for diabetics, but now it's made a breakthrough in endurance sports, and it's being used for athletes for fueling. Brands like Abbott Lingo, Levels Health, Super Sapiens, and Whoop and Aura are using these and developing these. However, in terms of the amateur impact, these can be highly expensive, with some apps to go with this piece of technology costing upwards of £50 a month. However, this could also be dangerous, and I think this piece of kit should be used sparingly within the amateur scope, especially if you are prone to a eating disorder or you obsess about your calories. At the end of the day, we are amateur athletes, we have lives outside of this sport, and most of us will never be professional. So if this continuous glucose monitor is something that's going to disrupt your day-to-day life and is all you're going to be thinking about, I would highly recommend not using it. However, if you are going to use it, some of the benefits are you can see how pre-race meals land, and are you bonking from low glucose or something else. You can also see how your body kind of performs in heat, which will be in the next episode. We will have our first guest of the podcast, but we'll come on to that a little bit later on. So who is this for? The curious around this area. If you love the stats and you love to analyse what you're actually doing and testing, see what works and what doesn't. However, like I said, don't use it if you're obsessively going to track, if you have a history of disordered eating or eating tendencies in general. It's also not for beginners without fueling basics, and if you don't have a current nutrition strategy that works, I would recommend getting that down first. So overall, this piece of technology can be useful, but only for the right athlete. It's not going to take hours off your Ironman time, but it might give you a bit of an edge. However, I think it could be extremely harmful for the wrong athlete. So know yourself before you buy the sensor. Trend 2 is now more brands are going towards carb-heavy sports drinks. They're going from 30 grams to 60, 70, 80 and even 90 gram gels. This is to help with the current research that's coming out we should have 90 to 100 grams of carbs per hour, and it's covering the new research. Brands that are doing this are Morton, which go at about £3.20 per gel. Precision Fuel and Hydration, which I personally use and really get along with, £2.50 per gel. Assist Beta Fuel, which I haven't used before, but that's a really carb heavy just gel. Trinity, a newer carb mix, and Endurance. I haven't used them ones before, but yeah, they are doing a higher carb mix with electrolytes in. However, what they share is they all have the 2-to-1 glucose to fructose ratio, and they're formulated to accommodate to the high carb era. These products are good, no doubt, otherwise they wouldn't be so successful, but the science is real, and you can't go jumping from product to product to product because your gut is simply not working. And as we discussed earlier, train your gut first before you go buying all these different gels. Now, the cost reality, again, for amateur athletes is the premium brands, so your Mortons and your Precision Fuel and Hydrations, are probably going to cost you around £30 to £50 per race. That's not taking into account your training, so it can get very expensive. However, you could also go to sweets and make your own stuff at home if that also works for you, as triathlon can be a very expensive sport. Now, the kind of amateur impact overall, fueling is a skill that can be trained. It's not the case of going to different shops and buying different gels. Start 8 to 16 weeks out from a race and train your gut and practice every long session whilst moving up gradually. And nothing new in the last 4 weeks of your camp. Now, that was the briefing, and I hope that you've taken something a little bit more or found out something new. I love hearing about the news, and I know that there's no real one place that I can go to find out kind of everything. This news section today has covered mainly Ironman topics, but on different episodes we will cover a lot more. At the end of each episode, I will highlight where I am now, and when we have guests on, they will highlight where they currently on now. This will kind of be a whistle stop tour, but I think it's good for me to almost kind of vent and get things off my chest about where I am now. So, it's been 12 weeks since my hamstring injury, and we are getting somewhere. I've had my first run back. It was a 3-minute on and 1 minute off, which worked quite well, and I ended up going for 20 minutes. But what I have found is I can run a lot better with a lot less, not pain exactly, but a weird feeling uphill. So the sessions I'm currently doing are on a 15% incline on the treadmill, going extremely slowly, which is a test in itself. I done a bike session yesterday. The hamstring flared up a little bit today, so probably not quite ready, but we are looking good. I have a 5.5k swim, 5.5k swim coming up in 3 weeks. That is in the river in Marlow, I believe, in the UK, which I'm actually not quite sure where that is. I'm going to have to look. But I really hurt my shoulder actually in the pool not so long ago, so it just seems injury after injury a minute. But we all have years like it, and it's about how we bounce back. In terms of rehab for the hamstring, it's been a bumpy road to say the least. I've seen 3 different physios, and all 3 have given me a different diagnosis. My most recent physio has been the best by far. Yeah, I'm not going to name names, but he's been really good, and I don't know if it's just because we're later on in the recovery process, but the hamstring seems to be getting better quite quickly based on what I am doing. The mental side of the training has been awful. I said this in the last episode, but I feel like Ironman athletes in particular don't realise how much we rely on training until the training is gone. The endorphin release, the time that it takes in our day is something that I actually crave, and that I want to do. So yeah, the mental side is definitely something that has affected me over these last, at least 6 weeks, I say. But we're nearly back. And over this period, I've learned that there needs to be more. I can't place all, it sounds a bit cliche, but is cliche the right word? But I can't place all my cards in, all my eggs in one basket, because when that gets taken away, I struggle on actually where to turn. Trained this week about 7 hours, gym, swim, and run, and then I am quite optimistic that next week we can get back to full running. I've also signed up for a 70.3 in France, which should be good next year. So that's the end of this podcast, and what is coming up. Next episode is a very exciting one, and we have a good mate of mine who is currently doing a PhD around heat training and training in the heat and how that affects your body, and he's coming on and going to talk a bit about his research. He is also a runner, a very good one, aiming to do all 6 major marathons around the world. So that would be a very interesting episode, to say the least. But thank you very much for listening to episode 2 of the 168-hour podcast, and I would love to know what you have done with your previous 168 hours. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode.